It's a tower of Mac Minis!
Ooh!
These 4 Mac Minis were headed for the bin when somebody asked, "Hey, do you want these?" You betcha! Now the Mac Minis from this era all look alike on the outside, but may have different specs. And with a pile of them to look over, you need to get organized. We have 3 Mac 6,1 machines, which can go natively up to Mac OS Catalina, and can take 16 gigs of RAM. They came with 4 gigs, and we'll upgrade those to 8 gigs of RAM that I have handy. We have 1 stray 5,1 machine, which might take up to High Sierra, but we'll worry about that another time. There are plenty of better instructions out there about disassembling Mac Minis. I'm just hitting the highlights. We'll pull off the bottom cover. Although you just rotate it counterclockwise, it was stiff and cranky. After that, we can quick swap out the RAM. In this case, going from 4 gigs to 8 gigs. That's easy. Pop the old ones out, slide the new ones in. Removing the drive cover and drive, that was a little tricky. The Minis are built like laptops, so they have a very tight fit. The tape holding the paper cover over the original hard drive was all dried up and fussy. It took a razor blade to peel it off. As I said, the fit is very tight, and I found it difficult to reassemble. With the first one, I ended up only using 2 of the 4 screws holding the drive and drive plate in place. Since there's no moving parts, this shouldn't be an issue. Just as a warning, on a different machine, I tried a more involved disk swap that had you remove the fan and the side shroud. I'd advise you to be careful, because I found it hard to reattach the fan connector to the motherboard header and ended up breaking off the motherboard header. I don't have the skills to fix that. Bummer. I got a little surprise. The SSD had an old install of Linux Mint on it. Mint runs really well on these Intel-based minis. I used a USB stick of Mint to erase this SSD before starting the Mac OS install. Instructions for creating your boot USB can be found on the Apple website. You'll need another Mac of proper vintage to create the install USB. We're using High Sierra because all the Mac Minis that I got will run it, and my pile of MacBook Pros from mid-2010 to 2012 will too. Take your time, follow the directions, and you'll be okay. You can simply copy and paste the instructions into the terminal. Just make sure your USB drive name matches the terminal command. Now comes the fun part. With the High Sierra Install USB installed and an Ethernet connection to the internet, it's time to boot up and install our new OS. You'll want to go to the disk utilities and erase/format the SSD so the OS can read it. Yes! It's going to reboot a few times. Don't panic when the screen goes dark. Go get a cup of coffee and maybe a sandwich. After agreeing to Apple's terms of service and setting up a computer account, we're done. Now we have a fresh OS installed on a zippy-fast SSD. Now we can upgrade the OS with Open Core Legacy Patcher and get some more recent Mac OSs. Open Core Legacy Patcher will allow you to work around Apple's lockdown of older Macs and install newer operating systems. At the time I did this, the patcher was having some issues with the latest OS, Sonoma. Monterey seemed like a safe choice. The instructions for Open Core Legacy Patcher shown here are from a much older version. When I did the Mac Minis, They were on version 1.2, so it didn't look quite the same. There are newer and better instructions available on the web, so I won't go through what I did. Just be aware of a few things. First, if you just use the defaults, the Legacy Patcher will create a USB launcher for that particular version of Mac hardware. Or you can set the version of the Mac that you're aiming for within the Legacy Patcher. 2 machines I have are 6,1 and one is 5,1. I can use the USB launcher for both the 6,1 machines, but not the 5,1 machine. Second, don't use cheap USB sticks. I burned up several cheap USB sticks when creating the USB installer for the newer operating systems. I found the PNY sticks work fairly well, but your mileage may vary. Third, when installing the new OS, the Legacy Patcher will reboot. A lot. It will also reboot, showing a bunch of disks to boot from. Don't touch anything. Let it reboot and do its thing. You'll know it's done when it launches into the Mac setup screens. After installing all of the patches and removing the USB, we have a nice clean version of Monterey installed. I found this using OpenCore Legacy Patcher 1.3. If you've installed the new OS, after a reboot, you may get a notice that you're still booting off the USB instead of the hard drive. This happened to me several times, so I pressed the Option key when powering back up. If you're using a Windows keyboard, you'll hold down the Alt key when powering up. Instead of selecting OpenCore Patcher on the far right with the hard drive icon, I chose the image on the far left with the OpenCore Patcher EFI boot with the image like a micro SD drive. This seems to have fixed the problem. Remember that OpenCore is a moving target, and a lot of documentation doesn't get quickly updated. It will ask if you want to do some upgrades for Monterey. It will even ask if you want to upgrade to Sonoma, which I did on one of them. Legacy Patcher will install the patches for Sonoma, so let it do its thing. The performance is a little slow with the dual-core i5 and 8 gigs of memory, but all of these puppies can take up to 16 gigs of memory. Not bad for trash, eh? I hope you enjoyed my tower of Mac Minis. I'm a tiny channel with no Patreon or sponsors, so every view, comment, or subscription really makes my day. Explore new ways to use old systems. Be careful and patient with fussy hardware. And as always, stay curious.